There you go. Perfect. Great. Thanks, everybody. Sorry for just a 5-minute glitch. Now just so good to see your face and happy for you to be here. We welcome all of you who have agreed to join us and listen to this lively, informative discussion. I am honored to represent NAS Recruitment Solutions as a Chief Customer Officer. My goal here today is just to really moderate and bring just the meeting of the minds. These are talent acquisition female leaders who have graciously contributed hours before today and are allowing us the opportunity to share insights on what they personally and professionally have initiated and engaged to really help women in the workforce. And most importantly, in the last 2 years, given the fact of all the impacts and dynamic of the pandemic. So before we begin, I really just wanted to take this opportunity to read through briefly some of the panelist bios. So first and foremost, I'm going to start with Jill. So Jill Lopez serves as a Director of Recruitment Operations for Methodist the Bonner out of Memphis, Tennessee. She brings over 18 years of healthcare recruitment experience. She's held many leadership roles in a variety of organizations and leverages her deep recruitment knowledge and a can-do attitude, which I have seen in action, and strong leadership skills as she embraces the challenges of the recruitment industry today. So Jill, thank you so much for joining and happy birthday.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The team decorated my office. I was going to take it down, but it was like, oh,
no.
Let's leave it up.
Yeah, little birdie told me that. So happy birthday to you. Thanks for
Thank you.
spending your lunch hour with us. Stephanie Romer, she and I have worked together for a number of years, and she's a trusted advisor to many senior executives who are embracing organizational change and looking to really create a culture of inclusion. So I know she's going to be bringing a lot of ideas and really people-oriented approaches to really workforce advances in diversity, engagement initiatives, leadership development, and organizational behavior experience. So again, super excited for Stephanie to join. She sits just outside of Northern Virginia, DC market. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you.
We have Marina. Marina is our Global Vice President of HR at M3 USA, supporting both US, Europe, Australia, and India. In her role, she's responsible for leading all of HR strategy, global talent acquisition, leadership dev, diversity, employee engagement, HR operations, technology, employee relations. She is amazing. I get to have the privilege to work alongside her on the senior team. So again, I'm super excited that she's going to bring her 25 plus years of experience to all of us today. Staying in the same vein, Najdeen, who's a senior executive search consultant for our, has over 30 years of experience, primarily specializing in healthcare, information technology, and her functional expertise includes C-suite healthcare executive roles, HR, and strategy. So we're super excited to have Naj join us as well.
Thank you.
And then to wrap it out, we have Shaquanda Gordon. She is an HR executive with over 15 years of experience. I love this bio. She prides herself in building healthy teams while using her extensive HR knowledge and experience to drive best practices, enable company strategy, and ensure a diverse and inclusive place to work. She's worked at Spartan-Nash, Gordon Food Service, and many others. And early in her career, she held HR roles at Purdy Health and Meyer. And she has spent 10 years as an adjunct professor instructor for Davenport University. So you have got the dream team here today. So full support. So again, we will, in just a few housekeeping items, we are recording this session. We will provide you a recording, a copy of the deck. There is a slide at the very end that cites all the resources we've gathered to create some of the statistics you'll see today. And we'll also include the bio links on LinkedIn if you haven't already connected with our panelists just yet. So thank you again. All right. So this is the panelist. Again, what we would like to ask is that as you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. I'll be monitoring those, or even ask Raywan and team if they can just pipe up. We have 3 very key pillar questions that we'd like to get around the group, but also we want to be sure that we're also addressing any concerns or comments or feedback you would like to give to the greater audience today. So again, thank you for joining. Great. So I'm going to go off videos just for a second because I really want to talk stats, and then I'll go live as we open up the questions. So panelists, feel free to do the same, your choice. All right, perfect. So really, we know the COVID crisis has really impacted everyone, right? So this is in 2020, the average woman already did most, or if not twice as much unpaid care compared to men. And one of the main drivers of this disparity is the burden of shopping, cooking, cleaning, caregiving of both parents and kids. Now, what has this done? This has really had an impact for women in the workforce in a way that they are leaving. Many have cited that over 2 million women have left the workforce since March 2020. And those particularly women of color and disabilities. So you'll see this short little dotted blue line in your screen, and you'll notice there that it's continuing to decline. Silver lining and the good news is, as we celebrate this month, International Women's Month, we want to also point out that it was celebrated March 8th. A lot of focus and emphasis has been around women and what their contributions are. We are starting to see a slight of a tick. So the good news is while there has been quite an effort and behavior of women leaving, we've also noticed now too that organizations are responding to this. So with that being said, I want to just move on to our first panel question. How has your organization responded to women leaving the workforce? Now, this is a key question, and I'd like to really start it, if I could, with Jill. If you're able to share with us, really talking about that flexibility of what you've been able to create at MLH.
Yeah, and we've certainly seen across the country that this pandemic has disproportionately impacted women, and particularly women of color. Lockdowns, like you said, homeschooling drove more women than we've ever seen from the workforce around the world. At MLH, we knew that was going to cause an unprecedented challenge, and we pivoted to support all workers, regardless of gender. We flexed work hours. We allowed associates to work remotely. Of course, we couldn't always do that for associates that were in the front line that had to be there for the staff and patients, but we also utilized our humanitarian funds to support workers who needed it. We had workers that were in crisis. Some had house fires due to the difficulty with the pandemic, had, bills they didn't expect, or funerals that were happening they didn't expect. So we have this humanitarian fund that we were helping to support our employees. But we also tried to pivot for those that either their spouses or significant others who were out of work due to the pandemic. We said, how can we brainstorm to see how we can support them and hire them in LMLH? We also said, we've got to do something more for our frontline employees. So we partnered with a YMCA to open an on-site remote schooling program adjacent to our university hospital. That's our flagship Methodist hospital, during the time that schools were closed in person due to the pandemic, to try it again to support these women who are trying to do it all.
And Aj, I believe you had a comment too about how the crisis has impacted you, in particular with executive search and what that's. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Would you like to also contribute to that, how you haven't seen that in executive search, particularly with women leaders?
Well, coming from the executive search side, it's been interesting to watch, because with change, you get a set of individuals who have opportunities, right? You have people who have resigned, so you have opportunities, but also with change, you have anxiety. So you had women who said, I've had enough of this. I want to find something purposeful, something fulfilling. So on my side in executive search, where we are retained to do executive searches for organizations, women have the opportunity to take advantage of those roles that they've been seeking and start the conversation about flexible work schedule, negotiating their compensation packages, and being able to step into their purpose and being able to talk freely about the things that have bothered them in the past. This gave them an opportunity to step forward and say, enough of this. This is what I want. These are my expectations.
Nicely put. Shaquanda, I know in preparation for this, we had a debrief a bit, and you had shared earlier about your experience and what you saw from the start of the pandemic and maybe that initial fear and where we are today. Would you elaborate a little bit more on your experience with that?
Absolutely. And let me apologize now if my internet is saying it's a little unstable. So if I get too choppy, just let me know, which is why I'm off video. So, early on in the pandemic, what we saw particularly at Spartan Nash was this fear, right? There was this fear of the unknown. The whole world was in shutdown. And at the same time, people were leaving the organizations that they were currently in. But there was a fear for most women in my space to leave, because they didn't know what was going to happen. They knew they had job security where they were. We didn't know what the long-term impacts were going to be for COVID. So you initially saw this steadfastness to stay with the employers that they were in. I will say that over time, as we started to work remote and you started to work, you didn't know where your day started or ended, because as you work remote, now all of a sudden you have 12-hour, 14-hour days because you've been trying to
Right.
mix everything together. And so, about 12 months in, now women are saying, okay, I'm starting to understand what's most important to me. I'm feeling the burnout like I've never felt it before. And then we started to see that resignation. But initially, everyone was kind of staying put because they were just the fear of the unknown.
Marina, I know that you had mentioned previously too about caregiving and career and how organizations have been supportive. Are you able to share some ideas in which organizations that you're responsible for have made those adjustments as a response to this?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like we all said, it's been about 50 years since the mass arrival of women into the corporate workforce. But the reality that we're facing now is that women are making different choices, and they're brave enough now to say, maybe being in corporate America is not for me. And maybe the environment that the company is providing for me is really not beneficiary to what I want to create for myself and for my family. Being home for 2 years kind of escalated and brought to surface some of the issues. And some of the issues are not so great. There is domestic violence, there is abuse, there are other problems that escalated as a result of that, proximity maybe that we didn't experience before. So as companies, we have to be continuously thinking and recognizing what's important for our employees. Maybe it's even on case-by-case basis, maybe respecting the choices that women make to walk away from the workforce temporarily, and then being able to open the doors and have them come back when they're ready to. And then the other thing that I think we all have touched upon is the flexibility, right? But flexibility, we have all these programs, we want to make sure that there is remote employment, but it also comes from the small places. Flexibility is important in things like maybe allowing for blackout periods in the meetings in the morning, knowing that this is the period of time that most women will be dropping off their kids to school or sitting them down in front of the computer screens to do remote learning, or maybe not scheduling the last thing in the afternoon, allowing them to go and pick up their kids from school. So it's the small connections that we need to make through our managers, through our executives to understand what the workforce is needing and bringing it up to the HR to try and resolve these issues.
100%. Yeah, those small things have made big differences for a lot of people, right? So those things absolutely have meaningful impact, and the family can see that, especially for those who work from home. Anything else any of the panelists would like to add before we shift?
Well, Marina brought up a good point. I made sure that for my team that we shifted our meeting start times to 9 or 10 o'clock, again, to accommodate that, getting them set, get them ready, because I'd rather them be present than to be stressed and trying to multitask and do things. And again, to your point, is pivoting. And I think someone best said it the other day when I was listening to a thing looking at 24 months after the pandemic. I think it's not so much the great resignation, but maybe the great reevaluation, reevaluating what you are. And I was like, that is what it really is. That was a terminology that I said, wish I could take credit for it, but it was someone that I heard on the say it. I think it was someone from LinkedIn. And I was like, that is perfect. It is the great reevaluation. Therefore, it's making our industry reevaluate. And I'm so glad that I'm in this position as a woman leader to be able to pivot with that change and reevaluate how we look at our employees and what we offer them.
Because we can help women see their worth, right?
Exactly.
And recognize their worth. And if their decision at the end of the day is that this is not what they need, we have to accept it and try to make the changes necessary so the new women that are entering our organizations will be able to adapt quicker. And when we talk about that self-worth, it's also about the training opportunities. I think, Jill, you have also mentioned that the reality is we need to try to offer programs. Not every company can afford tuition reimbursement, but there could be some upskilling, maybe learning information systems that you can introduce. Maybe there's a professional development reimbursement programs where they can get certifications. Maybe it's cross-training. But for those women that decided to stay or enter the organization, make sure that you provide those opportunities, including coaching, mentoring, leadership development, networking opportunities, anything that helps them to decide what the right fit is.
And you're right, Marino. we started a program for the Methodists. It was called the MAP. So it's a associate advancement program where we help people retrain on different specialties or different possibilities, surgical techs, CNAs, opportunities to reevaluate if they want to take that step back, get an extra skill set that will still afford them the opportunity to take care of their family and be part of our organization. So thank you for recognizing that. And I'm really proud that our company did that. And we've seen just amazing work with that and allowing people to then continue on their education and maybe pivot them into another career that's making them more fruitful.
Yeah.
I wanted to add,
Yeah, go ahead.
For M3 Executive Search, the way that we work together and the way we've made it possible to work remotely. I know some of you mentioned starting later in the day and having consideration for later in the afternoon. We use our calendars a lot because we work remotely. So a lot of times, if you need one of us, you just check the calendar. And so they too do take into consideration that somebody may be dropping off or picking up in the afternoon. And it's worked wonderfully. But the flip side is if you have the opportunity to work from home, you work all the time, right? You can go into the kitchen and get something to eat and come back to your office or fix dinner, and then you roll back into the office. So those who were concerned about working from home, I know I put in at least 10 hours a day sometimes because of the flexibility, right? If you enjoy your job, you have that balance.
I appreciate you. You were ESP here. So we were talking about striking that balance. So there are ways for which you can advocate for yourself, setting boundaries, priorities, and finding that balance. The word balance and flexibility, they can go in tandem, but I think it's important that you manage your time because to your point, you're right. There's no drive time in the office. So you really could be 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. without little to no breaks. And Jill just said it, being present. Like if you ask the additional time and energy and effort of your peers and vendor partners and anyone else that you're working with, it's really nice to make sure that you give them your full attention. Turn off notifications, but you have to put yourself first. You really need to create that space for you. One of the women leaders that I've kind of grown up since I started my career about 21 years ago is just reading Brene Brown. And one of the most, watch TED Talks is her Power of Vulnerability. And I just love this because it's empowering to know that you can either, this is your story to own. And I think one of the things that's yielded from the pandemic is the opportunity to lean on others, identify yourself, strike a balance, and hustle because you are worth it. Women leaders are worth it. And they have to give attention to themselves because you really need to be first. Studies have shown benefits of women leadership yield a more empathetic style. In fact, organizations have actually cited on the S&P that profits soar with women leaders, that there are ways in which, because they're more apt to participate in resource groups and things of the nature. So I just wanted to pause here to talk about how women have maybe influenced you, good or bad. Some of you may have a really strong mentor or someone who has maybe given you a different approach. I'd like to start with Stephanie, if we could. Talk a little bit about examples of how women leaders have built trust to increase productivity that perhaps others can learn to replicate.
Sure, thank you, Jennifer. I think the thing that we've seen here from some of the organizations I've worked with and even some of the research is that women are willing in general to step up to fill in the gaps that they see. So this is a hard time for employees and workers. And so women leaders are stepping in to say, what can we do? How can I help you? How can we prioritize the workload, manage your work life? Because women care about the employees that they have. And so they take on more while they're also having their own personal adjustments that they're doing. I think as everyone's talking, boundaries is a good one. As a leader, you also have to demonstrate your own setting boundaries and your own willingness to when you're stepping away, when you're willing to stay late and do more work. But some of the other things we've seen is that women are willing to take on additional efforts like supporting ERGs or women's initiatives, different efforts, maybe the DEI work that needs to be done on top of their regular work, on top of the stuff that they're doing at home or personally. And so that sometimes goes unnoticed by leaders. And so my advice in this case, as we're talking about it, is really, make sure that you're recognizing everything that you're doing as a leader in this space for the organization, because they're lucky to have you in that role and in that support place. So.
Right. Wanda, you had a really nice story, if you wouldn't mind sharing, about when we talked about who influenced you. And again, it went one of two ways, right? Who would you like to replicate or perhaps not? Would you mind sharing a little insight as to that personal story and journey?
Absolutely. So one of my first leaders many moons ago, probably about 17 years ago, I wasn't even in HR yet, was a female leader. And I had quite the opposite experience. I had a leader who people would stop me in the grocery store and say, how can you work for her? Right. And I was like, wow. And it was not a very good experience. It was one of those times where I really questioned my abilities, my capabilities. And so I learned what I did not want to be as a leader. I learned that empathy goes a long way. And after that, it really influenced my style as a female leader. Now, later on in my career, I did grow to get champions and advocates and sponsors, female particularly, who has helped me navigate my career. She has been a coach, she has been a mentor, she's been a counselor, she's been all of those things. And she has really put me in positions where I could shine. She has been my voice when I was not at the table. She has been the one that takes a step back and really looks at people and what their needs are. And so it's those competencies that has, from a woman leader, that has built the trust and the productivity that I've seen in teams along my career.
That's excellent.
And Shaquanda, you're right. I've had similar experiences where I've had some good experience with the leaders, but things I didn't want to emulate. So as we said, the great reevaluation, when I made a decision to come to Methodist, I was looking at who would inspire me, who would take me to that next step. And I'm very inspired by Monica Wharton, our chief admin officer here. She's a woman of color. She's a woman of representation. She's a woman that really emulates what I think is in a leader. Family's important to her. The patients are important to her. The associates are important to her. So she gives you that permission and allow me to be able to drive my team to say, I've got a mantra the team all knows. And if they're listening to this, they know I say it all the time. Rest, restore, renew. If you don't rest, you can't restore yourself. If you can't restore yourself, you can't come up with new ideas or new ways of looking at things. So she gives us the permission. She doesn't email us on the weekend unless it's really urgent and or patient-centric. She makes sure that we stop our emails at night. She tries to make sure that we're looking at life as more than just work. And that just inspires you to want to do more.
I think women in general in the workplace are able to make really bold and wise decisions as leaders. And at the same time, they bring something else to the plate. They can help make team environment less authoritative and more cooperative, maybe even bring more like a family-like feel to the team. And this both teams across the organizations is help implement a new culture within the business even. But at the same time, I think we often struggle as women. Where do we create that sense of authority? How far do we need to go? Are we still being viewed in a light that may be, not as complimentary to us as leaders? So we always kind of second guess ourselves. And I think it's very important for women leaders to know their position, to know that they have a voice at the table, and that voice is definitely valued. And once you put it out there, you will earn your respect, even in organizations that are a little bit behind that mark. As long as you continue to put your point across and you make good business decisions and good decisions for the people on your team, you will be respected and you will project a very positive image for the rest of them. It means that you can still exercise your authority. It means that you still can do performance management as necessary, but able to pivot and cooperate and work with individual situations when somebody needs a much softer approach. You can find your style, but you need to first and foremost put yourself out there. And that's what I would encourage everyone here.
I love that. And I think when you put yourself out there, how you're interpreted, kind of putting these things to the side, that's vulnerability at its core, right? So second guessing or triple guessing maybe how you approach or what you say, and do you champion with other beforehand? Sometimes it takes that extra work and effort just to almost subside your personal feelings, right? I know I have felt that where I may have gotten stuck, or maybe I came across too assertive or too bold, and how would I be perceived? And that takes a little bit of just experience too. But I'm just curious if anyone has those examples of how maybe if you've let go of that vulnerability and found that balance, found that place of assertiveness being accepted. I would love to hear from anyone on the panel with regards to how you've maybe experienced something like that.
Well, I'd like to add, my situation is a little bit different because in executive search, you're responsible for your client. And so you're working pretty much, by yourself. And now I'm remote, but I do have a team of people that I work with. But when I worked for a large health system, I would always make a point, especially with a new employee or new women into the workforce, to introduce myself, to step out and say, what is it that I can do to help you? Introductions to other people, just anything that was work related that would make their transition easier. And then I would wrap it up by saying, if I give you too much information, just let me know. I don't want it to be, oh gosh, here she comes again with some more advice, because I know how hard it is to transition into a company. So if I can make it easier, I always did that.
That was excellent. That's a nice move. I pepper in quotes because I have quotes and sticky notes and boards all around my many offices that I create, offices from my kitchen to my office to everywhere. And I wanted to kind of end this second segment a bit with a really nice quote from Rosalind Brewer. She's actually the only second CEO woman of color in the top Fortune 500. She was also the former CEO of Starbucks. And I love this quote because it talks about you can and should set limits clearly and articulating them. It's interpretive. It's a little bit of what everyone said. Know your limits. I wrote it: rest, restore, renew. So Jill, I'm going to put that on a post-it note.
Okay.
I'll think of you. It takes courage. And I think that's really where finding that inner strength can allow you to have that power and let you continue your own professional growth. So I just love this quote. I love quotes in general. She's a powerful female leader. I encourage you to follow her. She's amazing. And it talks a lot about, because that's an astounding stat, right? There's only 2 Black CEOs for the Fortune 500. It's startling to me to think that is where we're at, with regards to just the diversity and inclusion. And there's been a lot of talk about diversity, inclusion, and belonging. There's a lot of importance around this topic. And I think it's almost part of your DNA, right? So if you're part of an organization that isn't embracing these changes, and organizations like that, that's where I think some of that burnout, we've heard about burnout, resignation, and some of the reevaluation. I think too, we have higher standards, right? As those have left the market, some have left with nothing, not another job to immediately go to, right? So they've taken that bold step off because they know now exactly what they will work with and for, and who exactly they won't work with and for, right? So I think for organizations that recognize and reward women, it is a game changer for many of us. So I wanted to here on the third question about how has your organization embraced the need to do that deep cultural work? I mean, there's been a lot of movement in the last 2 years, some focusing on volume, some focusing on this, others looking at other gaps and areas of opportunity. But I'd love to know what maybe you have done or are aware of organizations that have really led where women are feeling valued in the workforce.
Well, I can speak for M3, and we
Sure.
started with organizing, just if we want to go into specifics, we started with organizing our diversity inclusion council that didn't exist before. So this was our first most important step in bringing a group of individuals together across all of our divisions and groups and companies, and bringing them together to figure out what exactly is it that we need to accomplish. There were a lot of discussions, there were a lot of conversation. It was a great group of people that came together, and we held our monthly diversity and inclusion committee meetings and council, and developed the schedule and plan of what do we need to put forward as our target. And we set the goals, and the goals that we set in the first year were very simple. We just wanted to recognize the diversity of our company. We do come from all these different global areas, and so we have diversity in place, but we can do more. And to start with, we also needed to review our own data, right? We all provide the reports, the EOC data. Some of us are on their affirmative action plans because we're federal contractors. But ultimately, looking at this data, looking at the proper reporting, what is your gender pay gap, if it exists? How are women represented in the executive teams or not? What is the gender-based turnover that you might be experiencing? Just getting those numbers in front of you and having a clear and honest picture of where your organization stands is the first step in the process. So you have to make sure that there's this equitable evaluation, promotion, pay scales. All of these pieces are put in place as a part of your diversity and inclusion plans. And then we started focusing on celebrations, celebrating women, celebrating diversity, sending announcements. In the last month, we done a spotlight. Women shared their own experiences, who they respect and honor in their lives. And these resources, celebrations, recognitions, it starts to set the tone for the organization that people are valued. It matters. You're putting this out there because you want to say that you recognize them. It's the holidays that maybe people didn't know about before. And then the third and very important point for us was, of course, the recruitment and the talent acquisition. We had to widen our talent pool. Undoubtedly, people come with different skills and attributes, and they all can contribute to the organization. But you have to be intentional. And that word intentional for me is very important because, yes, we put those ads out there and we try to recruit people and we put our EOC statements. But what do you really do in order to target the pool of candidates? Who do you connect with? And for us, it may be targeting specific populations, but actually NAS has helped us with through their own Activate platform. We are accomplishing this targeted advertisement for our open positions. Maybe it's part-time at-home moms, or maybe it's military wives, or maybe it's some other population of women in market research. As long as you're intentional about this and you think this through, you will be able to target the right people to bring into the organization. And of course, with the diverse pool of talents, there is no doubt that the organization will record a significant increase in productivity. So it's the small steps, and you will see how slowly but surely you will get everyone else engaged and on board.
I love that. I love that. Intentional. That's great. Jill, I see you nodding your head. I know
you're absolutely right. And you're right. And being specific and targeting, and we're doing the same with our advertising, et cetera, but consistently thinking about diversity is a must, especially for recruiting or hiring a position. And having a diverse workforce is a pillar to any organization. It's extremely important. I mean, I am fortunate that at MLH, 83% of our entire workforce is made up of women. 78% of our MLH leaders are women. So I'm inspired here. And 47% of our MLH senior executives are women. But I want to pause because we talk about DEI as gender, race, or disability, but sometimes we overlook an aspect of DEI, and that's age. And we sometimes forget that age is a really important piece of that DE&I. So I wanted to do research in my own company to see how we were doing. So we did do statistically looked across the board, and I was proud to see that our women leaders range from the age of 20 to the mid 70s. And when you look at our women leaders, the director level and up, the age is 30 to 70. Why that's important, and even in my own department, I'm proud that our youngest is 21 and our oldest is over 80. So having a variety of ages allows us to think more creatively, enjoy a wide range of perspectives, allows us to look at things from the baby boomer to the millennial to the new generation, making sure that we're looking and talking and speaking their language. But more importantly, we're not minimizing the knowledge base of somebody. The biggest thing with women is we hit a glass ceiling. I remember growing up, I got to be a leader before I'm 40 something or I'm not going to get there. And now I'm trying to say, why is that our ceiling? Why should I be ashamed? I'll share. Today I turned 56. Does that mean that I'm going to be retiring in 4 years and I'm useless? No, I want to be sure that we are saying that we could be good across the board. So we need to recognize in our own companies that a woman doesn't stop learning and growing just at a certain age.
Oh, I love that. What a great personal story.
I'd like to add something. First of all, Jill, you made my day. There's still help for me, right? But on the flip side, when I have executive candidates that I'm introducing to my clients, they're smart, they're very savvy, and they will look at the website for the DEI information, the mission
Yes.
statement, the vision. And if they don't see it, they will ask about it. And if they do see it, they then will go and check the leadership out. So companies who have this out there on their websites and their leadership doesn't represent what they communicate, executive candidates are savvy and they know. So it is key, because if it's important to you as a candidate and the company doesn't represent that, you can lose candidates just for that.
I would add too, Jennifer, as important as it is on the recruitment side, which is everything that needs to be done, there's also an effort of looking inside at the talent you already have inside. And what are you doing to help promote, encourage the talent that's there? One of the things we did recently with the Leadership Women's Panel is really look at, or not panel, but leadership workshop, was really look at psychological safety and how that plays out across multiple places. So is there bias in the workplace that we can work on? It requires a comfort to be able to speak up about bias if that's happening on your team or across your organization. Maybe building the relationship with your manager or supervisor to talk about what you need, what you want. It's that empowerment that we talked about early. If the relationship isn't there, if the safety is not there to have these real conversations, then it's hard to make change in an organization. And as good as all the recruiters are, if they get there and the organization isn't where it needs to be, kind of what Nadine's talking about, then, you know, a lot of that work sometimes is a loss because internally they're not ready. So I think there's two parts of that that are so important that you can be working on from a DEI. I think you even have somewhere belonging in there, which I think is important to really get that inclusion. You know, are you safe to question? Are you safe to make mistakes and fail? Are you safe to challenge thinking? Because that is what we want for that diversity of thought. I think Jill had kind of talked about that's what you want. In order to get that, everyone's got to feel comfortable that they can step out there and make those comments or questions.
Stephanie, I totally agree with that. This is Shaquanda. When I was at SpartanNash, one of the things that I was very intentional about, because I think sometimes once we get to that executive level, we feel like there's nothing for us at that level. And so I was very intentional around creating the space for all of the women vice presidents. So we were WVPs. So instead of MVP, we were WVPs, and we got together and we made connections with one another. There's a lot of demographic statistics out there that say, you know, when there's two women in the room, they're usually, well, if there's one woman in the room, she kind of feels lonely and like her voice isn't being heard. When there's two women in the room, they kind of are competing against each other to have a voice. And then when you start to get three and more, you start to have that camaraderie, the collaboration. And so I wanted to make sure that was there. As executives, we know it gets lonely at the top. And so having that space, that respite for us to come together, we were able to really come together to, one, share our thoughts, hopes, fears, concerns, but then also spend some intentional time talking about how do we make things better? We were the decision makers. And so how are we ensuring that every woman that walks through the door, we were 48% women at SpartanNash. How do we make sure that every woman that walks through the door can bring her whole self and feel supported and feel like she belongs? And not only that, we were very intentional around, okay, who are we mentoring? Who are we taking under our wing? So it wasn't just paying it forward, but it was also reaching back, because we recognized that they were hungry. Our individual contributors and middle managers, they were hungry to hear from us, because they were so excited to see us, to look up and see us. And so we really had to be intentional around making the time and making the space for them to be able to interact with us. And that was one of the ways that we really did try to create that workplace where women felt valued. They could come to us and talk to us about the things that you wouldn't normally be able to talk to your male boss about. They could tee things up with us. We had an open door policy. I made sure that we created spaces, again, for us to just come together, and they could reach out whenever. So I think that was one of the things that really helped to spark this sense of belonging and empower them to really take their jobs head on.
Yeah, I love that. Those are
That's
all
great.
really great points. And perfect. I love it. So I wanted to just point out here where we are now and where we stand today, right? This has been such amazing conversation. I'm continuing to take notes every time I get together with this group. I am inspired and I'm challenged and I love it. And you know, the truth be had is corporate America is really at a bit of a crossroads, right? The choices that corporations are making today will impact women in the workplace for decades to come. So I think companies' commitment to equity is really the benefit of everyone, of productivity, of retention. And I found this stat, and again, this was actually shared as a clip from Stephanie Romer. So thank you, Stephanie, for sharing this. It talks a lot about women working for, equality leaders, those who are leading organizations. What are the benefits? And those who are lagging? There's a converse chart, right? So job satisfaction, well-being, loyalty. If you create this space that we've talked about, the inclusive culture and the belonging and the challenging, as someone said, the ability to make mistakes, right? And challenge. That is normal. That is exactly what's expected. It's how we grow and evolve. So this is researched, it's accurate, and I believe it's absolutely something that we can certainly continue to make it statistically known, but also to do all the great things that we've heard, which is reaching back, camaraderie with your peers, and even camaraderie for those on this panel, right? For those of you who are looking for other leaders, for mentors or guides, it's a responsibility to build up. And I think that's something that we've all been responsible for and continue to, ask that you guys continue to do so. Stephanie, were there any additional pieces on this report? And I can send a link to this after that you wanted to bring up before we wrap with some of the key takeaways of what you can do today that you wanted to share?
Yeah, I think just, the first one, Jennifer, that came of this was the surprising piece of that everyone's looking at this. And so I get the big, summary I'd give for this is that when an organization or a leader is there with you to flex, to adjust, what you get back from that employee is twofold, right? They're willing, the loyalty's there that we see here, their productivity's there. And so I think remembering, as busy as things get and that we are, that employees are looking to be considered and given autonomy is another piece that comes to mind here. Actually just saw this article today from Daniel Pink that showed this chart of how when meetings go down, autonomy and productivity go up. This fascinating piece to share. But I think that's the summary that I put there. It really is that when you're thinking of others, when you're listening and asking them for what they need, that will give you an employee that provides this discretionary effort to the work, right? That means they're willing to give back when they know you need it because they know you're willing to give to them when they need it.
Yeah. Very good point. SHRM also recently posts a leadership, like a women in leadership article. Again, all of these resources will provide. I wanted to just give, and not all of these things can happen overnight. Marina said it nicely with small, simple steps. If you're already doing those, challenge yourself to embrace and go bigger. But what can we do, right? So what can we do is having a meaningful, intentional, I love Shukran's word there, diversity strategy, and that may mean, Jill, age, right? That was a unique, I loved your stats. I think that is awesome. Yeah, don't stop. You're so young. And look at those metrics. I think that's a lot of what organizations, what is your baseline and how you can incrementally create more diversity and inclusion within your workforce, identify those hidden biases. As Stephanie mentioned, those are difficult can be crucial conversations, right? But they're necessary. They're necessary to have because, in short, we probably all have some, right? And that is something that challenges us to think and do differently, which we should all strive to do. A more inclusive work culture, feeling that comfort and safe space, and that returnship. I've talked to a lot of women in my neighborhood, particularly. I've worked from home for 10 years, but COVID clearly put a lot of teachers and others at home, and so I'm walking the neighborhood, and some, they didn't need insight teachers. So they need to go back to work. So that upskilling or reskilling and re-embracing them back to the workforce, there's a strategy for that. There's a meaningful outreach there. So these are all things that if you're not doing or doing some of, these are nice ways in which you can re-examine and try to deploy some new strategies at your organizations. I want to end with a quote from a female leader. Whenever people would ask me when I went to college, what do you want to be when you grow up? I said, I want to write a book and be on Oprah. Because I just that was my dream. That hasn't happened yet. But I love where, her path to growth and development. She did not have an easy path, right? And she continues to contribute and to give. And her role is to build up women and family and children to have it better than she did. So she now has the courage, and I love this, to say, this is who I am, because it may have been unheard of, some of the changes and the networks and all the things she was responsible for, being a female leader, right? So she started her career here in Baltimore, Maryland. So I'm really happy to see that, but glad to see where she's going too. So this is where I really want to stop to thank you guys. Like I said, I'll give you guys a copy of this deck. All the resources that we've cited are here. It'll come back to you. And I just want to pause and stop, share, and look at any chat to see if there's questions or comments. I haven't been able to look. Oh, these are great. I'll open it up. Does anybody want to raise their hand or have any closing comments? I know we have about 8 minutes to go. Probably all rushing to that next meeting. I hope not, but would love to give a chance to you guys to speak too. No? All right. Well, you guys, I really want to, oh, we have a message. Let me just see if it's, again, you're welcome. Thank you guys for taking, again, the time, the energy and the effort to contribute. I think that we've all enriched, I know you've enriched my day, and hopefully others. So thank you again for your time, and I will wish you all a great rest of the day. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.